Welcome, mortal, or whatever you are tonight. You've stumbled into my lair, and I suppose you're expecting comfort. Maybe something soft and sweet to lull you to sleep. Too bad. I'm Acantha, your host, your nightmare, your favorite mistake. I tell bedtime stories the way they're meant to be told. Dark, sharp, and dressed in velvet. Upon a night, darker than ink and twice as deep, there was a girl with a hood the colour of fresh spilled blood. They called her Little Red, though she was not so little anymore. Red walked the path beneath the black trees, her basket forgotten on her arm, because something else had awakened in her that evening. Something wild. Her skin prickled, her teeth itched, and her heart beat like a drum calling her to the hunt. You must never leave the path, her grandmother had warned. But stories whispered in her blood, stories older than grandmother, older than wolves. And when the moon rose fat and silver, Red stepped off the path, and her bones bent, and her claws sang their sharp little songs. She was shifting, skin to fur, girl to beast, for the very first time. Now, in every story there is a wolf, and in this one there was an alpha. He prowled the wood, proud and sharp-toothed, never knowing he was being scented by a new creature. Her creature. His mate. He thought himself the hunter, but Red had caught his scent first. She knew the taste of him without ever touching, knew his name in the way her new bones ached for him. Fate can be cruel, but it can also be hungry. So when the alpha lifted his head and caught the air, his heart stumbled in his chest. Something, someone, was watching, not prey, not rival, something worse, something destined. The path behind her vanished, the basket fell, and Red laughed, a laugh not entirely human anymore. For she had found her wolf, and he had found his doom, and the woods would remember the sound of it for 100 years. My darlings, is a theatre that never closes. On this stage, the moon hung like a chandelier, and the trees leaned in like critics, certain they were about to witness a scandal. Red stepped into a clearing shaped like a held breath. The smell of iron and cedar, storm made into a body, burned bright on her tongue. There you are. Her bones sang. Yes, yes, I see you clutching your pearls. Let them go. Pearls love a good gasp. The alpha entered the light the way night becomes morning. Nothing theatrical, everything inevitable. He was large in the way winter is large, cool, honest, terrible only to the unprepared. His eyes were old coins warmed by a palm. He looked at Red, and the coin melted. They moved around each other once, twice, not quite touching, not quite sane. Red's new claws bit her own palm to keep her from closing the distance. The alpha lowered his head. No bow, not exactly, but the forest marked it down as one. My darlings, this is your friendly narrator, Acantha. A word of practical advice. If destiny ever climbs out of the dark to look you squarely in the face, stand up straight, even if your knees wobble, especially if they wobble. That was when the mistake arrived. Another shifter, lean as spite and twice as hungry. He wore the moon in his eyes like a dare and sniffed Red as if she were fallen fruit. The clearing bristled. The alpha pivoted, a line of living gravity. The newcomer bared his teeth, his grin said mine, and now the pearl clutches faint. The fight began the way thunder begins, with a silence so tight you can hear the air blink. The scavenger lunged first, of course he did, and Red saw his ribs flash under his hide like pale knives. The alpha slid aside, weightless as a rumour, and drove his shoulder like a door through the other wolf's chest. Claws spoke a language older than bells. Teeth argued case law no judge could overturn. They crashed through saplings. They made the night jump. Red, who had shifted halfway and didn't know how to be halfway anything, joined the fray like a red comet. One slash opened the air. Another clipped the scavenger's ear and decorated the grass. He snapped for her throat and caught her cloak instead. Bad choice. She twisted free, drove him sideways, and the alpha's jaws closed where Red had pointed him like a blade. It was not a long fight. Good law rarely is. The scavenger folded into the shadows, credentials revoked. The forest exhaled. Owls who had bet against the alpha owed a fat vole to those who hadn't. Red stood with her chest heaving and the taste of iron in her mouth, thrilled and terrible and more alive than she had words for. The alpha turned, not triumphant, not savage, simply done. His gaze met hers, and something in Red knelt without moving. "Do you understand?" asked the quiet between them. She did, and because she was Red and not a sermon, she laughed again and tossed her hair back from her throat. "If you can keep up," she said, "and yes, my darlings, that is precisely how one speaks to a king of the woods." The alpha's answer was a sound so low it shivered the dew. He stepped closer, their breaths braided. He did not take. He tasted the air at her wrist, fur-brushing skin like a promise that likes to be repeated. Red's eyes burned bright, her mouth softened into a dare. The moon, busybody that she is, poured herself over them like cream. "Why me?" Red asked, not timidly, but as queens ask a vizier for the math behind a war. "Because, my darlings, the forest knew her name before she did. Because some hungers are keys and some bodies are doors. Because fate, bored of whispering, chose to speak aloud." The alpha's head lowered until his brow rested against the inside of her arm. A courtesy, a claim, a vow with teeth sheathed. Red's hand slid into the ruff at his neck. She felt the lion heart thrum there, steady as a drum. "Why me?" Red asked, not timidly, but as queens ask a vizier for the math behind a war. "Because, my darlings, the forest knew her name before she did. Because some hungers are keys and some bodies are doors. Because fate, bored of whispering, chose to speak aloud." The alpha's head lowered until his brow rested against the inside of her arm. A courtesy, a claim. Red's hand slid into the ruff at his neck. She felt the lion heart thrum there, steady as a drum. "Mine," he said. "Ours," she answered. They walked then, just two bright dangers side by side, beneath branches that pretended they hadn't been eavesdropping. Red's cloak caught on root and thorn and did not tear. The night, for once, remembered its manners. When they reached the edge where the path forgot itself, Red stopped and turned. And, "My darlings, I remind you, there are two kinds of fear. There is the fear that shrinks and the fear that fits like a tailored coat." Red chose the second. Claws darkened, fangs sighed longer into the sweet air. Her eyes held the moon and did not blink first. She threw her head back and let the sound in her throat come out. It was not a scream. It was a name. The alpha lowered himself, not kneeling, never that, but accepting the weight of a crown he hadn't known he wanted. He touched his muzzle to the hollow of Red's throat, there at the soft hinge of a life, and drew in her scent as if reading a letter that had finally been delivered. "Will you keep me?" Red asked, and the boldness of it startled the bracken. "It delighted me, obviously." The alpha's tail made a stroke in the grass, always, but he did not bite, not yet. He handled the moment as if it were glass, and he meant to drink from it for years. Behind them, the scavenger's shadow grew thin and went into the ground, the way bad stories are meant to go. Red set her palm to the earth in thanks. The dirt answered with the busy, happy silence of roots. The woods have a temper, my darlings, but they admire good manners. And so the pact was made without priest or paper. Not with blood, there had been enough of that tonight, but with breath and nearness and a laugh that belonged to two mouths. They did not promise to be tame. They promised, instead, to be true. Morning found them where night left them, which is the best way to be found. Red's cloak steamed in the first light. The alpha blinked slow, satisfied blinks like a cat that has remembered an old song. Red looked toward the path and then away from it. She had not lost it. It had lost her. "Walk?" she asked. "Run!" said the alpha, and the word, though unspoken, was large enough to carry them both. "My darlings, close your eyes if you like, but leave the window cracked. The woods remember what is worth remembering. On fat moon nights you may hear it drift through the branches, the red bright laugh of a girl who knew her hunger, and the steady rumble of the wolf who knew its answer. Not a warning, not a lullaby, a promise, properly kept. And if the path calls you some night and your bones ache as hers did, do not be alarmed. Check the moon, tie your cloak, leave the basket. And if a scavenger snarls at you from the hedgerow, well, smile with all your teeth. Some lessons are best taught once. Good night, my darlings. Sweet dreams? No, never that. But dream dark,